Okay, and so welcome to the people who join us online. So it's my pleasure, everyone, to introduce you to Kathrin Eitel, who is a cultural anthropologist. So Kathrin will give the keynote for the workshop. And we are very grateful to the Center for Khmer Studies to help us organize this workshop, this talk, and also, of course, to our partners from Bopana and from RUFAM. So Kathrin has a focus feminist science and techno studies and critical infrastructure. So she's exactly the right person for the workshop. And she has been a Walter Benjamin Fellow at the USHH University in Ho Chi Minh City, the University of Osaka in Japan, and the Polytechnic University in Italy. And she has done extensive ethnographic research on waste recycling in Phnom Penh for her PhD. And that has been the basis of her fantastic book, which is called Recycling Infrastructures in Cambodia, which was published last year. So it will be a great pleasure for us to hear more about her research, about the way she's doing research about waste and recycling in Phnom Penh over time. And Kathrin will also help us develop some concepts for your project, so some ideas, ways of using other kind of sources, because I think that's one of our key interests in the workshop. And so the title is Circular Researching as a method for making sense of urban fabric. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Kathrin and thank her again for nicely participating with us. Please, Kathrin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. John Rupsui. I'm trying to share my screen now. Give me a second, please. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation, Stephanie, and also thanks to the Center for Khmer Studies for inviting me and making everything possible. I guess you already had some exciting days, so if I'm correct, the workshop started yesterday already. So it seems like that you already went out into the field, which is Phnom Penh as an urban area, and the social materiality of the urban fabric is the main topic of your workshop. So I want to start here somehow and build on that by exploring a method that I call circular researching as something that as a method for making sense of the social material study, social material. Sorry. There was my phone ringing. Okay, so today's topic delves into the method, as I said, which is called circular researching, and that very much connects what you will explore in the workshop. So it's based on built forms and infrastructure as an archive. And as you will see, I will also use some empirical examples from my research that I have done in Phnom Penh on the local recycling economy. So basically, I'm coming from a very interdisciplinary background. I'm a cultural anthropologist by profession, let's say, but I have studied also history, even medieval history, European medieval history, anthropology, of course, social and cultural anthropology. I have studied European ethnology, political science, political philosophy, and even economics. So not all at once, not all at one time, but in different areas and times throughout my study program. So what I always find quite irritating throughout my studies, and also later when I became, more a cultural anthropologist, was that there are different perspectives that each discipline brings with it, and also different methods how to conduct research. And normally, there's seldomly things are mixed up. So if you're a historian, you use historical methods. If you are a cultural anthropologist, you use normally ethnography as a method. So what I seek with circular researching is basically to mix up things a bit. And during my PhD research that I've conducted in Phnom Penh on the local recycling economy, I was basically intrigued by the idea of circulating, of the city's agile, the waste pickers. So a habit of them when they go back and forth between their depots and the different households in the street when they pick up recyclable. So I really find that interesting, and it really intrigued me, this circulating, to think differently about, how we understand linearity also when, something follows the other, whatever it is, for example. I don't know, rainy season follow the summer, or A becomes B, or whatever. So I was just thinking about what linearity means, basically. So my starting point was the fabric of the city. So yeah, let's start. So first of all, if you look at these two pictures, the question is, what do they have in common, no? So on the one hand side, you see the National Library of Cambodia, which was built in 1924. And on the other side, you see one waste picker I was following and working with, and her push carts with lots of recyclables. So I don't know, at a first glance, one would say there is not much common, isn't it? So I mean, okay, those pictures play out in the urban fabric somehow. So they are in the city of Phnom Penh, but there is not much that, I don't know, comes into my mind what they have put in common at once. We will go back to this picture at the end, but I just wanted to give you a glimpse of how things might be very unrelated once, and but are not so unrelated at the end. So what I'm going to do is, this is the content. So first I talk about the social materiality of the urban fabric. Then I want to make sense of archives, as you might be already, I guess you already delved into this topic, but I want to quickly pick it up again. Then I'm introducing the method of circular researching. Then I've provided some guidances for pursuing a circular research, and proximities of the vivid recycling infrastructure will be one of the last points before I wrap up. So let's start with the social materiality of the urban fabric, a very difficult word in English, I think, to pronounce, at least for me. So social materiality, what is it all about is the question. So it's more than just an architecture. It's more than built things that we normally understand as part of the city. The city is so much more. The city is entanglement of different people, actors in general. That also means non-humans, cats, dogs, whatever, and stores and stalls, and of course also architecture. But that all comes together and builds the social materiality of the city. So this picture, for example, I took when I was first in Cambodia for my research in very early 2018. And during this time, I didn't know actually, I knew that my research object will be the recycling economy, but I didn't know anything about it, basically. So I made a picture of that, and I was wondering, oh, what is it? I mean, what is in the black plastic bags? What is in there? So I had a guess, but I didn't know really. So, and that somehow intrigued me, and my interest arose, especially coming from another background from Europe, where waste is handled in a very silently way. So you normally have clean streets, but it doesn't mean that everything is, recycled well. It just means that you don't see it. So yeah, in Cambodia it's different, and that arose my interest. So what I perceived as the social materiality of the urban fabric was at once, at the beginning, lots of rubbish, of course, especially during the summer season when the rain doesn't wash waste away in the dirt. But I also perceived lots of, especially women, circling around the city and cleaning up. I also perceived sentry. I mean, it was in former times. Nowadays, there are different operators in the field, but during that time, it was the sentry had the monopoly. So I observed all the things and tried to make sense of it. But how? And that was the question: how to make sense of all that what I perceived? Because that, of course, is the starting point, as I think, for each research, so also yours probably. So what does the perceived tell me, and how can I make sense of it? So before I answer that question, I quickly wanted to dive into the archives and the question of archives. So if we think of archives, or at least if I think of archives, I am envisioning something like that. So a repository of different documents, files and folders in a very dusty place somewhere. I don't know. So that is actually what comes into my mind when I'm thinking of that. However, there has been already someone in the 70s who has thought archives differently, and that was Michel Foucault. And the question, and before I come to that, the question is, how can the city be an archive? I mean, how can we transform the idea of an archive as a repository or anything else to the city? How can the city be an archive? So Foucault actually did an archaeology of knowledge, that's the title of his book basically, and he defines archive as something, as the first law of what can be said, the system that governs the appearance of statements as unique events. So in his understanding, the archive is not a physical repository of documents, but it is a practice that causes a multiplicity of statements to emerge as so many regular events, as so many things to be dealt with and manipulated. So basically it defines what can be said, what statements are legitimate, and what gets preserved. The interesting thing in this idea is, in my opinion, that a concept that represents the underlying system of rule, practice, and conditions that govern the production, transformation, and organization of knowledge within a particular area. So that means, in turn, that there are always more than one archive and during different periods of time. That is just what I read out. Sorry, it was a bit too fast. So to dig into this archive, one must do, according to Foucault, an archaeology of knowledge. So that means that's an approach to studying the history of ideas, knowledge, and discourses. Instead of analyzing historical events or the thoughts of individual thinkers, Foucault focused on the structures that shape and constrain the production of knowledge across time. So that is the idea, to become an archaeologist, basically. Then he advised to look into discourses, discontinuities in history, epistemes, so that means underlying frameworks of knowledge, and also archives, I mean in the traditional sense, to understand how knowledge is produced. Because in Foucault's opinion, and he's not the only one, that's something that currently also the transdisciplinary field of, or interdisciplinary field of science and technology studies does. Knowledge is basically power. And the question is also always how people know, what can they know, what can be said. Knowledge is basically the entrance point for, I would say, a lot of researchers, as it was, for example, for mine. So the question is, now we have the definition of an archive that is not only, something like a repository in the sense of a traditional archive, but more as a practice, as a system of tool. So how can I make sense to social material urban fabric, particularly when it came, for example, to my research object, which was waste and the recycling economy. So how do I do that? Should I become an archaeologist of knowledge then? Is that a good idea? I mean, that is what Foucault is suggesting. And then I was thinking again back to the way that the HIs in the city work, this circularity, and it really grasps me, because going back to history kind of only means that we do historical research on a topic, but how can we link it to something that becomes the future, that is anticipated, something that is currently very vibrant or pressing, like climate change, for example, but also the kind of waste crisis. So the idea that developed from there was to go back and forth in time and space to understand how the object of inquiry is produced, transformed, and organized, and not only the object of inquiry, but also to understand how the knowledge of this object is produced, transformed, and organized. So let me delve a little bit on the method now, and then I come back to my empirical example to visualize what I mean with that, how to apply it basically. So circular researching as a method. By the way, this is a method that really developed at the end of my whole PhD. It's not something that I developed at the beginning. It's rather something that came up at the end. So what is circulation, by the way? I mean, now we have somehow clarified what is linearity, but what is circulation basically? I mean, circulation there, I mean, I have no time to delve really deep into that, but only to say that circulation is a concept, or was a concept that was often referred to, especially during the 50s and 60s throughout the cybernetic transformation path, and also it's very prominent in system theory, for example, in sociology. I don't want to go too deep into that. So the thing is, circulation is something that refers always back to something. So the idea of circular following or researching is to follow a certain object, and an object of study, such as a theme, an idea, or phenomenon, and that is to trace this in a nonlinear recurring manner. That means to follow this object involves repeatedly returning to the same subject of point of inquiry, each time deepening the understanding by considering new context, interpretation, or connection. So basically, seems to be, I mean, coming from an anthropological field, this seems nothing new, no? But because you are always going back and forth somehow to your research object, you are investigating in something, and then you are trying to make sense of what you want to research on. However, what I try to, the point I want to make is that it's not enough maybe to only go back and forth in a sense, in a thematically sense, regarding to one's topic, but to look on different time spans, for example, or to look on, especially on different sites. I think that is a really important remark I want to make, that doing, for example, research on the social materiality of the urban fabric of Phnom Penh, for example, doesn't mean that we only do research in Phnom Penh. So because there are different influences and different infrastructures that have evolved over time, that needs to be researched to understand and make sense of the urban fabric. Moreover, and that's another huge point, I think it's important to follow feelings, intuitions, and then so-called ethnographic hunch, as Sarah Pink mentioned it. So something that is in between. I mean, research is never linear, and research is always chaotic. And the things that glue everything at the end together are also feelings that we follow. We follow a feeling for interest, for example, or we have an idea of how it could be, and then we talk to people, or we do otherwise ethnographic or however research. So it's very important to give room and acceptances to the feelings and to the sentiments and the intuitions that we feel and follow throughout our research. So what is the aim? So the aim is to connect different methods and approaches from different disciplines, to connect basically past, present, and future all together. So to understand or make sense of the multi-temporality of a research object, and at the same time, of course, also on the multi-spatiality of a research object. That means to connect different topics, discourses, and whatsoever from elsewhere. And with elsewhere, I mean, not from, a local site, but it can be also a transnational site. It can be, I don't know, a discourse that is not located even on one site or in a digital space, for example. So it can be very fluid. That reminds me a little bit of Bruno Latour's idea of following the thing, which is quite similar to that. You follow the thing through time and space. So my plaidoyer is basically to be an archaeologist of knowledge, but also a futurologist and ethnographer all in one. The assumption of this method is that even practices as distinct fields are connected to your research object, as I just said, and these mediate and change and influence how things are known and unknown, how they are governed and transformed, for example, when it comes to the waste economy in Phnom Penh. And things can only be understood as special and temporal, multiply produced. Okay, I can't see you anymore. It's okay. It was nice to see you. But however, I just continue then. All right, so how can we use it? How can we make use of this research or this method? So, yeah, thank you, Nancy. You again, perfect. So this is a very little guidance how to use it. And I mean, that's just an idea, and it's still everything in development, the whole concept of all these methods. So yeah, it's not, it's open. I'm open for any suggestions here. So I thought maybe it would be nice for you to see how one could proceed in such a research. And so what I did was I was kind of building kind of enumeration of what to do first. So of course, first of all, you need to define your research interest based on the urban fabric. So what do you want to find out? What intrigues you? What do you want to see? And then I have kind of, I'm referring here to Susan Laser, who is an infrastructure scholar, a quite prominent one. And she says that it's very important to identify master narratives at the beginning. So discourses, statements, things that are, somehow in the room, I don't know, that are circulating around, that are pressed in the media, for example, or somehow playing a representative role in the discourses. But also to see what kind of issue or problem they are representing, including their solutions and tech fixes. So, and then you follow, of course, also your intuitions. So you look out for resonances and trust the ethnographic hunch, as I just said. That is basically the first level of information, as I would label it personally, because you're researching. The first thing you do in research is to grasp basic information, because you always need to know that you don't know anything. I think that's the best presupposition how you can enter a field. You don't know anything, even though, of course, you know, and you have feelings and ideas, and you think already that you might know how it works, but the best starting point is always to think that you don't know. You are a curious researcher, you want to find out everything. So that is the starting point. And the first things that you find out are the first level of information. And it's not a level of insight. The level of insight comes, let's say, a little bit later, after you craft all the surface of information at the beginning. So then you do, for example, ethnography research, but you also can do a historical research, whatever it fits to you on that topic. So you do interviews, participant observation, how it would be in ethnography, for example. And through that, you can detect the controversies, cleavages, and different notions that become apparent. And that's the first level of insight, I would call it. So you recognize that there are irritations in your research field. So there are people not only having different opinion about things, but also, having different sentiments on things. Different values and norms play a role, for example, when it comes to the waste recycling economy, how it should be handled, for example. So for the HIs, for example, waste is something that is very valuable in many senses, because it sustains their lives. They can make money out of it. On the other hand, for others, it's very dirty, So there are many different notions on site that you can find out through the first, initial research. And what I'm arguing is that it's good to go further from there and not stop here, but to map the effects of proximities that are at stake to understand the composition of the research object, including its power dynamics. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, that's a really complicated sentence. So what are proximities? Proximities, in a sense, are something that I haven't explained yet, but that played out in the slides before as well, is to recognize the closeness, the proximities to other objects of inquiry, other topics, other themes, and other situations that are not playing out necessarily at the same research site as you are at the moment and you're researching it. For example, in Phnom Penh, but for example, and I will make another example just in a minute, somewhere else where, for example, waste management models are developed or thought of. Okay, so this is more or less how I would proceed, or how I proceed in my research. So the question is, what does it mean? How can we apply it to a research? So the almost last point is the proximities of the proximities of the vivid recycling infrastructure. I call it vivid recycling infrastructure in Phnom Penh because, there are many actors in the game, so to speak, and it's very vivid as it is not so technical. Maybe it is also technical, but as this infrastructure only is functioning in the city because there are so many people involved, and without those people, the recycling sector would just break down. So therefore, it's kind of vivid recycling infrastructure as I have defined it. So first of all, let's follow my own steps. is define the research interest. Okay, my research interest was the social material urban fabric of the recycling economy. And the second one would have been to identify master narratives. So prominently, master narratives in this field have been to clean up day, for example, as the World Garbage Day, but also the Sustainable Development Goals that you hear everywhere, basically, whenever it comes to development in any sense. And of course, the circular economy model. The promise of the circular economy model as something like a tactic that can bring the solution to Cambodia somehow. I don't know if you have ever come across of that. But these were the master narratives that I identified and that basically told me at the beginning that waste is something bad that needs to be abolished. I mean, that's the message, basically. And the solution would have been the circular economy model. And so what I did then was I went from this master narrative to do ethnographic research. So I was doing participant observation, I recorded audios, I recorded soundscapes, I recorded film materials, I went into archives in a traditional sense, I dig in everywhere, everything that I thought I can need it somewhere or can help me to better understand the recycling economy on site. So what I developed over time was that there were, of course, differing notions of how waste, particular waste, is understood, but also aluminium. And that is very much a relational material that, of course, is never just, waste. But waste is differently depending on who is looking at waste, who is using waste, who wants to make value out of it or not. So the waste is differently shaped. And one of the main insights I had during this time was that the circular economy, basically, the problem of the circular economy basically is that waste is understood as a very neutral and physical object that needs to be abolished, but it's much more than that. So that was where my first level of insights, let's say it like that. And I started to look out for other proximities and also the histories for how it forms the ways how things are done. So the first proximity, I mean, there were multiple proximities, but I only want to open up here about 3, I think, also due to time constraints. So the first proximity was the proximity of the material in general. So what was the before life of waste, basically? So if we stick to plastic and aluminium, I wanted to understand how these materials came into the country. What is their past, actually? And how could certain political infrastructure develop that are very much interlinked and entangled with this material? So the question was how did plastic and aluminium enter the country and how was it perceived and what future vision were inscribed in these materials? So kind of maybe a little bit of a history of where aluminium and plastic comes. So aluminium was primarily developed for the American Aka-Vietnam War in the 1950s, especially for parachutes. That is one of the reasons why it became suddenly, and also plastic, by the way, why it became suddenly so prominent and there was such a rapid development of these materials because there was a war machinery behind it. And plastic was developed once almost simultaneously to aluminium, only because someone was searching for a lighter alternative to cheap billiard balls, really. So what happened basically was that plastic and aluminium came into Southeast Asian context. And that was the time during where Cambodia was still under French colonizers' reign, which lasted until 1954 approximately. So what you see on the picture above there is a rattan chair with 2 obviously Western people, obviously maybe colonizers. Actually, I don't know yet. I don't know exactly where this picture was taken because I just had it from the internet, but it depicts very good what happened all around the world, that where these rattan chairs were a symbol of wealth and modernity and also of reign and rule, that became the first things that became synthetic. So rattan chairs were one of the most mostly exported product from Hong Kong, which developed during this time as a new plastic trade center, by the way. So this is just a very nice example, I think, to show how actually on which routes plastic came into the country. And these routes were colonialized. I mean, these routes were built by colonial and foreign powers that were initially exporting resources and materials, such as rubber, for example, from Cambodia, as you might know. But on the other hand side, during the 1950s, now brought new materials into the Southeast Asian context, especially through Hong Kong and from Hong Kong to Cambodia. For example, there on the right-hand side, you see a national toy company who is making advertisement in the Far Eastern Economic Review. That's a journal who was very renewed during this time. So whenever you wanted to know what's going on with, economic activities in the Southeast Asian region and also including Japan, you followed the Far East Economic Review. So that's just one advertisement of the national toy company. During the 50s, there were the main export products were, besides of rocking chairs to Cambodia, also toys, for example. And that was only happening and possible because Cambodia had a very, a golden age between the 1960s and 1970s, as it's often called. So since the Cambodian cinema became more popular, for example, and even Prince Sihanouk was one of the leading figures. He even directed, produced, and acted himself as a part of movies. And you see that's the picture on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you see Cap. You might know that Cap was the French holiday destination throughout the French occupation period, and also afterwards. I mean, still like that a little bit, I think. So what you see on the pictures, which have been taken in the 60s, are plastic inflatable boats, which very few locals could afford, basically. And you see on the picture, I don't know if you can see it, but I can't see so many locals on the picture. Seems like rather foreigners there. So plastic was therefore not only perceived as a symbol of modernity, but slowly as also a symbol of prosperity. And this picture was taken in 76. So shortly after Khmer Rouge took over in 75. I don't have to say much about it, but whatever was before on prosperity and, maybe golden ages has come to an abrupt end. So this is a woman riding the bicycle just alongside of abolished, abandoned cars. So everything that was connected to modernity in any sense was abolished during this time, as you know. So to wrap up, what does it mean now? The first proximity shows us basically that plastic as a symbol of modernity is a symbol of modernity and prosperity, but that came mainly into the country through foreign actors, and especially not only through actors, but through the infrastructures of trade that were already laid back then a long time. So the second proximity I wanted to open, or the question that arose out of this insight was, where does the legitimities for waste disposal programs derive from? So where does it come from? I mean, how is it possible that there are so many waste disposal programs in the city? And the hypothesis is basically that it's very much linked to the notion of problematization, because the question is always, if you have a strategy for something, you need a problem for that. And the question is, who defines the problem? Who knows the problem? What is a problem? I mean, is a problem, when does something become a problem? So problems, and that's not only my opinion, there are a bunch of literature on that, problems are always produced. And based on these problems, such as the waste crisis, strategy can develop and find legitimation. And that could all not only come into the country, but could develop in the country, because there was a very rampant marketization in the 80s and 90s. You might remember that after Khmer Rouge, there was suddenly the country was open. You just imagine there were a couple of very long years where nothing could enter, and then suddenly everything broke up. I mean, everything could enter, every material, every product could enter. And I mean, in relation, for example, to Thailand or Vietnam, who during these times were already in very much entangled with capitalism. Cambodia was really like, a field that has not been occupied by any of these forces. So what happened was, of course, that there are a massive amount of products swept the country, not suddenly in the 80s, but a little bit later, in the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, also when the free election started. So that was something that's quite unusual because it directs us to the question how to deal with these materials, and particularly how to deal with the waste that these materials become or are producing. So, and there were no strategies on that. Cambodia never got used to it, to deal with this kind of synthetic materials. They just swept the country, and people, of course, were overwhelmed. What to do? Okay, let's throw it away. Sure, as we do it always. So, and that's very logical habit, I think. So, however, what I wanted to say is this rampant marketization makes it possible that different strategies and ideas of how problems could be solved came also into the country. So the country was not only swept by materials and new products, but also by ideas from elsewhere. So what I wanted to show you is the next picture, and I'm running out of time. So, for example, modernity was not reintroduced, but it was newly not introduced, but it came differently into the context. For example, here you see the UNTAC, the United Nations Transnational Authority in Cambodia, which was basically a UN peacekeeping mission, which took place between 1992 and 1993. And the UNTAC's main task was to restore civilian and democratic order and prepare for free elections. And on this picture, you see the very diversity of international military men. There's one from France, one from Italy, and one from Australia, I think. So they were very how to say it, interesting composition of different people in the country. We wanted to, basically help Cambodia to have their first free elections. So what they are handing out is a radio, which is a symbol of modernity, to listen to the election and to be able to follow them. So, and secondly, and now we leave a little bit more the historical context, problematization, the way how problems are made, are also very much linked not only to symbols that are transported like modernity, but also underlying concepts of nature and culture, for example, as something that is very separate from each other. As nature, that's something that needs to be preserved, and culture is something that has basically the power to preserve the nature. So nature is something that is disentangled and separated from culture, and nature is something that needs to be preserved. And that's quite contrary to many other cultures, not only Cambodia, what I find in Cambodia, but the entanglement, the daily living, with the nature, with their spirit, and the daily practices with nature is so much entangled in daily life that it's basically not separate. So, but all these legitimation studies, or these strategies that develop on these problematizations are basically separating nature and culture, and that relates us also to other fields of problematizations, for example, when it comes to environmentalism. And I don't want to touch on that. It's very important for me to say that. I don't want to say that it makes no sense to do so, but I say that one needs to adapt it accordingly to a certain context. So, for example, here you see, I don't know if do you know that it's Kamko City, just a very good example how nature is now, becoming a part of the city again, because as you might know, Phnom Penh has developed in a very, the city developed according to its architecture in a way that the nature, in the sense of parks, for example, or lakes, had not really a prominent place in future vision. So this is quite interesting how this develops now, as nature is something becoming valuable again for this kind of gated communities, and which shows very clearly that there is a new understanding of nature and culture as something separated, as we know it basically from another cultural context than from Cambodia. Or, for example, here another real estate announcement. Lots of green, and inside the interior design is quite woody. Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to finish up. So the third proximity is those of classification. So the question that arose eventually after I recognized that waste disposal strategies were based on problematizations from partly elsewhere, I was questioning how these strategies are confirmed. So how could they be legitimized? And then there I investigated the culture and history roots of waste classification systems, particularly, of course, through the past. And again, here you see some announcements in the Far Eastern Economic Review again. And what you can't see here, because I couldn't find the picture yet, it's somewhere in my files, is you see on the left-hand side, you see a picture or a post on plastic, on the plastic father, so to speak, in Hong Kong. So that was kind of insider information. And on the right-hand side, you saw how many plastic toys were exported to which country. And there was initially another picture that showed out of which kind of materials plastic is basically built. So what kind of plastic we have, for example. So plastic fibers such as polystyrene, polyethylene, terephthalate, so different chemical makeups that make basically plastic. And based on this classification system, solutions were designed. So it's a very common idea that everything needs to be classified in its material substances in order to get rid of it or to handle with it accordingly. So, for example, plastic is classified according to its individual material parts, but it also is valid for waste strategies in general, waste disposal strategies that are very much separated into certain outcomes or, for example, social, economic, or environmental aspects. And basically, that is all very much entangled. This is not something that it's not to disentangle, basically. But there is a cultural practice of separation, and that's my argument, that was already that was defined throughout the 50s and 60s and became prominent in the region. What's developed on that were waste fantasies, basically, and often they are adjusted, and but these are materialized imagination for navigating optimal synthetic waste management based on long entrenched ways of doing politics. So the city's numerous wastelands, basically, as unruly urban sites, however, are completely indifferent to solid waste management progress and capitalistic value production. So here, for example, you see a part of the sewage south of the city. And those, hybridities or those the social materiality of the urban fabric here provokes a different version of the city, as, for example, also others do. For example, here you see a goat on the old landfill, Tuang Mam Chey, which finds food there, and I don't know, it's part of the abandoned landfill. And of course, the HIs of the city are keeping essentially the whole recycling infrastructure up, even though there are programs coming into the country and leaving again. So finally, I'd like to wrap up quickly. So what I wanted to show is that the effects of different proximities, as we have now seen, show that there are different dominances at stake in the social material urban fabric. So something we didn't see before. If we just look on, the HI circling around the city, or one of the pictures beforehand, we couldn't see that. We could only see and kind of detect it after we investigated in it. So it also has shown that the way how predominant waste disposal strategy flourished the country, how this is done based on very long entrenched ways of doing politics, basically. And when we do see waste on the street, it is because different strategies cannot be implemented on the whole city, as the system has grown over time and has its own recycling practices. That's one point. But the other point is that the problem, do you remember the thing with the problematization, how the problem is made? The waste problem cannot be solved on the contemporary side, of course, because where circular economy of course try to adjust things as the problem are produced and managed by a system of fluids from elsewhere and from another time also, that envision future cleanliness and nature also otherwise. So if we come back to this picture from the beginning, we see, okay, there is much more in common than just those two things that are happening in the city and are part of the social materiality of the urban fabric. There are, in these two pictures, are different power relations inscribed. For example, I mean, the library has been erected by French, and on the other hand side, you have the local waste recycling economy that are often overdone when it comes to new technical ideas of how to solve the waste crisis. So understanding the social material urban fabric as an entrance point to grasp first unseen connections helps to do a temporal and spatial holistic research, as I argue. And that's the blame you again, be more than archaeologists, be circularist. Make use of different methods, approaches, and epistemic patterns in order to understand the many different archives, the system of rules and practices that are among us, and that are important to discover. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathrin. It was really fantastic, and I think there will be a lot of questions. Maybe I point out a few important things for all the participants in the workshop in what Kathrin said, which I think are super useful for what we are doing this week. I think it's the idea of multi-temporality, thinking the past, the present, the future all together. The multi-speciality, I think, was also very important. So the idea that so you do not just, look at the object where it is, but you try the different forms in which it has existed or exists, and try to find all these forms and to connect them together. So I think multimedia would be also something very interesting that we can discuss further with you, Kathrin, in your practice. I have some questions, but before I ask my questions, maybe I will also ask the public if they have anything to ask you. So I don't know, Sanan, or do you have any questions? Or online, maybe we have also some questions, I don't know. Or should I start with mine? I can start. I mean, if you have any questions for Kathrin, if you have some methods that you would like to share with her, so please do it. I think that someone can really translate things if it's a bit complicated to ask. So do not hesitate. It's really super lucky to have an ethnographer, a cultural anthropologist like with us today. I was interested in the idea of the city as archive, and I was wondering if using the city as archive has something to do with the way of decolonizing the production of knowledge from your point of view, making knowledge from another perspective, having something that top-down imposed. You use different kinds of sources to find things. So no one tells you what to think. You take all the things and you try to understand and to put them together, and you start, thinking from your own level up to something. So that would be an idea of decolonizing knowledge, making everyone able to produce knowledge. So in what ways does the city, have that kind of process?
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I couldn't understand everything from your question. I'm not sure if this is a problem of the micro, or because when other people talk, I can hear them clearly. I don't know, but
I can call it, yeah. Okay, so I was trying to bridge between you and the students, and make it possible for them also to ask kinds of questions in terms of methodology. But yeah, I was interested in the idea of the city as archive and the way it changes how we produce knowledge about the city, about the people who live in the city, about all kinds of processes, historic ones, political ones, economic ones. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. That's a link to everything. So yeah, I mean, I was basically also quite intrigued by your workshop title of the archive with the archive. So that led me actually to delve into a little bit more into the system of archives. I think the social material or the urban fabric as an archive is not only one archive. It's of course, I mean, it's a system that it's something that we see on a how to say it? Okay, a city is something that we can perceive, and based on this perceivedness, we can go further to understand maybe on hand of what we perceive, what kinds of underlying system of rules are on site or play out or have a certain dominance. So for example, when, I don't know, for example, when a gated community is erected, or a new bridge, or a new museum, for example, these are all, I mean, subsumizing different ideas of certain things into something that is material or social material to grasp at the end. So the archive actually, I mean, we can say the traditional archive, a repository of different things, not files, but for example, social materiality could be the city, but there are archives that procurement where the underlying systems that that make what we see and perceive. And I think the thing is, how can we gain power over those archives that are not ours, basically? And that's a question that is swinging with the idea of decolonizing knowledge. That is to produce knowledge, of course, to find our own systems or adjusted systems which results in a different social materiality of the urban fabric at the end. I don't know if this explains.
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe I want to turn the floor to the students to make sure that this idea of knowledge production as archive and decolonizing is clear. If I say, what is an archive for you, what do you tell me? And what thing can be useful in a city to tell the story of the city? Something that is not necessarily a text. Anyone have an idea of? Yeah.
បាទអញ្ចឹងថាបទភាសាឬក៏ថាទីក្រុងគឺជាបទភាសាបើសិនជាយើងទៅពាក្យថាទីក្រុងជាបទភាសាយើងអាចនឹកដល់មានអីទីខ្លះណាប្រហែលជាពាក្យធំដែលយើងបានឃើញឬក៏យើងបានគិតកន្លងមកមានពាក្យថាបច្ចេកកម្មហេដ្ឋារចនាសម្ព័ន្ធof ទីក្រុងណាដែលប្រាប់រឿងថាទីក្រុង តែបើសិនជាយើងកំណត់មើលក្រៅពីនឹងតទៀតយើងអាចនឹកឃើញដល់តែគេទេជាឧទាហរណ៍ចំពោះគាត់អត់បានកំណត់មើលអគារគាត់អត់បានកំណត់មើលលេខាចនាសម្ព័ន្ធក្រុងប៉ុន្តែគាត់បានពិនិត្យមើលសម្រាប់នឹងជីវិតរបស់សម្រាប់វាទៅណារកណាឆ្លងខាងអ្នកណាទៅណាអីហើយអានឹងវាប្រាប់រឿងរ៉ាវពីទីក្រុងមួយហ្នឹង ប្រាប់ពីទស្សនៈនៃការធ្វើទំនើបកម្មជាវត្ថុមួយដែលឆ្លុះជានិមិត្តសញ្ញានៃទំនើបកម្មជានិមិត្តសញ្ញានៃភាពគឺថាប៉ុន្តែគេបានឆ្លាស់ជាសម្រាប់ខ្លាយទៅជាសំណល់ដែលជាបញ្ហាដល់បរិស្ថានដល់ការរស់នៅនៃជឿនៃទីចឹងថាជាលើកជាពីមក cái bàn đến ta xây cái prap lương ra bị tì tròn mùi chỉ bằng xa chỉ qua miền chỉ xây cái môn bằng sao anh ở dân du lịch đến cái mũi ông bị tì tròn anh làคือOkay,
so for the apparent transformation affects the city of Phnom Penh is the Benzaquen-Gautier canal as a whole. So when I look at the old picture, I see a beautiful natural stream across the city. Nowadays, to drive a it is filled with black water and with plastic bag and styrofoam plastic floating along the canal, and it's kind of becoming a sewage dump site, not as a beautiful nature as it used to be. So I think the rise of consumerism in the 80s or in the 90s when it's arrived to Cambodia, it's start playing the city waste landscape. And because in Cambodia we used to fold banana leaf as a package for our food, and we have this natural street to up the meat, but now we all use plastic to pack out food. So I think, yeah, it is the very good insight to see and to connect with the past and who bring those plastic to the country, and why those plastic still persist in our society. They kind of replace the old way of doing things because out of this convenience that the modern society invented.
Can I?
Yes, Kathrin, please go ahead.
So maybe I can just say something to the comment. Thank you very much. I think, yeah, this rise of consumerism was really a kind of turning point, I think, in the country when it comes to plastic and aluminium and styrofoam and all the theoretically recyclable materials. However, I think I wanted to highlight or emphasize that I think the main argument or the plaidoyer that I have for the recycling economy is, or for the strategies that are involved in this, is basically that strategies need not only to be adjusted accordingly on local, on site, you know, and how things are done, but they need to be developed from the bottom together with people that are involved in recycling economy since ages. So, for example, the recycling economy that is based on the HIs and all the waste pickers on dumping fields is something that developed over a course of about 30 or 40 years, for example. I mean, in firsthand, there were Vietnamese people in the business mainly, and now since 10, 15 years, it's changing. But this is very important to recognize that there is a growing system. It doesn't mean always that we need really old habits. They are not always the best. That is what I wanted to say. I want to highlight that the expertise and the knowledge about how the recycling can work well accordingly to one's, you know, norms and ideas and cultural beliefs also is already on site and could be developed further in this sense together with the people on site. And yeah, I think I wanted to highlight that again, because of course, I mean, there is definitely there is a waste issue in the city. I mean, this is nothing that we can deny, no? I mean, but the problem is that there are so many actors in the field right now that everybody is doing his own, you know, little project somewhere, and all these projects have certain time spans, of course. So it's nothing. It's not a joint and collective endeavor that is happening right now. Yeah, just wanted to say that.
Trong some form like the some kind giống có bảo được như thế này hay bảo là không có bảo đấy vì từ luôn không thể có đấy chứ cái quan trọng vậy mình không chỉ bắt slide on cái này là cái comment nó không đủ mấy được không bắt slide thì dương tọt mà dương mà trong xã hội trong nhiều này ta chia cái thử kích chụp nhẹ tại cái quan nên không cái recycle របស់សំណល់ទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងណាជាប្រព័ន្ធមកថាយើងជាទៅខាងលើទេទៅពីខាងក្រោមអត់ដែរអញ្ចឹងទៅដល់ជាមួយខាងអ្នកបតាប្រមូលអេចាយទៅអ្នកលុបអេចាយអ្នកដិតអេចាយទៅអញ្ចឹងទៅអ្នកដែលនៅខាងក្រោមនៃប្រព័ន្ធហ្នឹងគឺត្រូវចូលរួមដែរអធិបតេយ្យរបស់ស្រ័យមិនអាចគាត់ដំណើរស្រាយឃើញតែពីលើហ្នឹងខ្ញុំសង្កេតគាត់ចង់និយាយមិនសំខាន់ប៉ុណ្ណឹងចង់និយាយដល់តែសួរសំណួរថាបោះស្ទេកនេះថាតើយើងអាចប្រសិទ្ធភាពពាក្យថា ទីក្រុងគឺជាបណ្ណសារបើគេថាជាព័ត៌មានដែលអាចឲ្យយើងបកប្រែមកស្វែងយល់អត្ថន័យឃើញស្អីគេមួយណាពាក្យថាអត្ថន័យបណ្ណសារដែលយើងអាចទាញវាមកយើងបកប្រែយើងច្បាស់នេះបកចូលនេះមើលឃើញអីគេមួយអញ្ចឹងចំពោះយើងតែនៅក្នុងទីក្រុងនេះដូចថាតែយើងអាចឃើញស្អីគេនៅក្នុងទីក្រុងដែលយើងគិតថាវាជាព័ត៌មានជាបណ្ណសារអីសម្រាប់យើងបើដល់ពេលយើងឧទាហរណ៍ប្រាប់យើងតែយើងឃើញស្ថាបត្យកម្មជាឧទាហរណ៍មួយស្បាច់ចាក់ស្ដែងស្ថាបត្យកម្មគឺជាបណ្ណសារពីព្រោះអីវាឆ្លុះបញ្ចាំងឲ្យឃើញតាំងពីអតីតកាលមកបច្ចុប្បន្នភាពឃើញជីវិតឃើញការវេលាជាប់នៅក្នុងកំឡុងប្រវត្តិនេះមានពីដើមមានទីសង្ខេបមានកន្លែងនៅទូនីតិពីមុនមកបាច់គាត់រមកនៅបច្ចុប្បន្នគឺមិនអត់ចាំបាច់ឃើញណានាគេទៅស្អីគាត់ឃើញយើងអាចយល់បានណាចឹងវាអីគេទៀតគាត់ឃើញសម្រាប់គាត់ឃើញបន្លាយទឹកអាចជាស្អីមួយដើម្បីប្រត់សាច់រឿងពីទីក្រុង
anh chờ đón trong một nước thứ ca từ chia sẻ con cũng được trong một kỳ món mình là
bài này là cái bài này
từ ca đón chia sẻ con món anh ha engage với Khmer văn mình đang miền trả cho bạn mà bật bài này giống bài chạy nơi màu lọc thì trong ấy vì quan test từ lớn số công làm phiền không ca rồi nơi tầng ca thì quật nè anh ha giờ chưa bật tay lại như sản phẩm khá tiền khác ha tại sao anh dạy chuẩn bị được lớn lực lượng ai lại chụp ấy sơ ban đây là program mình bật sang sau này thì đấy sơ ban được món này và rất kia ha vì chỉ ca thì quật môi đại dân ở toàn bàn gật tu professional chính dân ai dân ai tha sao mà to về lời trình lực cái đẹp trong trong
nhưng trong là dân kích mình thành nè ai từ ở vậy nuôi đại là dân ai thường chắc ưu tiên thì chào chắc anh em nhóm sinh viên thường lường kho và tìm môn để mà vừa là tổng hợp trẻ nó vậy mà những tôi nhận đây còn phải là ta vừa mình em này anh dương cái làm biết còn là chỉ cần là còn chỉ kết và gắn kết bao nhiêu ta luôn tự nhiên tại hàng ngày tại bởi đại dương bạn khơi nhận tài tại khi cháu thì họ nhung từ cái còn ngàn lại nhung khơi được nửa thì mình tìm môn tìm chắc tê tại lời nhận tài mà chúng ta vừa tiền chắc anh dương quên ok thì bạn vừa mình chắc tài dương con gì ta lời chắc thì con cho con ấy là năng chắc tài
anh ha temporary anh muốn là
anh vậy đó là dương Phật như trời bạn biết mà mẹ bạn là chỉ cam kết vẫn thấy anh lừa quay lại anh lừa quay lại bạn anh lừa quay lại chia xong thì cứ chặt tay mình tôi bóc tay lừa mình lưu vào đây chẳng miền là thì miền thì chẳng lừa biết
Bớt xin chị ác vậy chị ông lại một hành tập hành thì mình
nên cái tâm thì lại khương cho các tục ta để ban chỉ riêng
So to me, I also from the transformation Phnom Penh to billboard, through billboard and signs of from the government and also the from the investor and NGO as well. Like for example, when I was young, when I travel from my hometown to the cities, I see a lot of signs showing how to prevent, how to use condom to prevent HIV, something like that. But then, from time to time, like say 10 years from the past to now, I don't see much of that signs. So maybe it's a sign that people start to aware of these things, and then NGO done put more effort in doing to promote that. And also, I mentioned it yesterday. I'm really aware of the sign of the government trying to promote themselves. Talking about making peace from like basically the government trying to promote itself by saying like as the one who saved the country from the Khmer Republic, like to peace, something like that. So from each time to each time, from each time to each time, there's a way that they there's a word that they use for themselves, for the governments, something like that.
Nó cứ có ai billboard tại con mà cười nó có cười hay nó billboardឬក៏ព័ត៌មានឬក៏អីដែលឆ្លាក់សារទៅតាម billboard ទីណានេះការផ្លាស់ប្ដូរដំណើរសម័យកាលពេលវេលាដល់ពីមុនមានការសកស្ាយពីបញ្ហាចេះទៅឬក៏សារអីពីតាមរដ្ឋាភិបាលឥឡូវមានអីផ្សេងពីនឹងទៀតហើយនឹងមានសារអីផ្សេងអញ្ចឹងវាឆ្លងចាក់អីគេឆ្លងចាក់ពីបញ្ហារបស់សង្គមឆ្លងចាក់អំពីគេមនោគមវិជ្ជាទស្សនវិជ្ជារបស់នយោបាយតាមរបបសង្គមផ្សេងនេះឆ្លងចាក់តាមនៅអតិសង្ឃក្នុងទីក្រុងតែเป็นการพัฒนาสังคมที่แบบที่โยกประเทศจีนจากกัมพูชาแล้วก็สร้างเรื่องแต่จะเรียนอะไรเรียนอะไรเรียนแต่เรียนช่วงใจปีเองปีนู้นปีเก่าอันนี้แต่ถ้าเรียนมาสังคมมันจะเป็นอะไรสังคมจะมีโยงไอ้พอที่มีในกัมพูชาไอ้มาเมาโตไอ้จีนจากกัมพูชาก็อาจจะทำให้ต้องเป็นการเรียนในยุคแบบโลกยุคไม่ยุคเดียวก็ยังมือคือในอย่างเต้นคือทางเด็กนักโตนักเลยการบอกโตนะแต่ก็ยังบางการที่ไหนที่ไหนเอาที่ไหนที่อ่านเลยเนาะที่ยังไม่เรียนตอนที่เรียนนะเป็นคณะเรียนที่แต่ชอบแต่ของไทยโลกโลกไทย
If I can just jump in on this idea of billboards, I think it's excellent because you see also all these billboards of fantastic condominiums and buildings that will never be built. So in a way, it's not only an archive of what has been, but also an archive of the things, of a vision of the future that will never be. And I think here we go back very much to what Kathrin saying about, about being multi-temporal. And that's a fantastic archive. I completely agree with you. I mean, actually, they should be fully documented, all these billboards of, everywhere. And amazing source of information about actual municipal policies or, architectural policies, and the ones which are just like a kind of dream in a way, or projection, or something that cannot happen. And that also, I think, connects to another idea that Kathrin was mentioning, which is master narrative, which is pretty much what we're talking about now. And also the idea of, I would say, identifying problems or issues, like something is working well, but, well, it should be kicked out. So let's say that's a problem. And at the moment that someone says it's a problem, then a solution must be found, and then all kinds of mechanics, start around, and that changes the situation. I think that's what you described, Kathrin. The way change in the city is also implemented through the definition of something that is a crisis or problem. I don't know, maybe some talk about that. Maybe someone wants to say something about that.
My next question is that so when you mention about or HI, so we as a youth, we think that single-use plastic problem to the waste in the it does make it look bad, messy, the plastic waste flying around, but to the collector, those are not the problem, those are a solution because they make money out of it. So have you ever brought this question to them? What if in the future the government decide to ban the single-use plastic in Cambodia? How would that affect them, and if that happened?
I couldn't understand the whole question. Maybe Stephanie, can you repeat it, or someone else, because the sound breaks regularly.
Yes, so he was asking you, he was saying, if, for instance, the Cambodian government decides to ban plastic because we know that plastic is not good, then what happens to all the people the whole economy, people who are just living out of this bad substance? So what happens to them? And in a way, I think your question is also what kind of solution we find. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, very practical question. I think basically, as an anthropologist and by pursuing this research, of course I wanted to uncover how certain dynamics work. That is my foremost interest. But of course, after a certain while, one has certain information about the object of inquiry, of course, and then it's very close to it comes very close to the question of how should we solve the problem in the problem. I mean, basically, there's a lot of waste, and especially plastic laying around. You're completely right. I think if theoretically, I mean, that's an utopian perception, but if theoretically Cambodia would say, okay, we ban all plastic entering the country, which is basically impossible, I think, because plastic is a very valuable material as well as it's used, for example, throughout operations in hospitals, for example. So, but many other things, aluminium as well. So those materials have definitely very valuable aspects as well, and we need to reuse them, and we need them also in a certain degree. But if this would be the case, of course, the local recycling economy would break down, so to speak. But what I perceived while I was talking to the HIs always, because my question was a little bit different, because I used to ask them, hey, what happens if the formalized waste recycling system takes over? Because there are many endeavors in the field to formalize the informalized economy, which will be, partly maybe working and partly not. And those women kept on saying to me, Kathrin, that's no problem. Then I find another job, because I used to do that. And that is really something I find quite impressive also. But I think that's direct to, and that is something that you can better judge than me, of course. That's something direct to how, certain norms coming from Buddhism, for example, are also part of the culture, and how to see things. Things come and they go. And I mean, that also provides a certain sentiment of relaxation, maybe, what comes, in the world and what comes into your life. And I think then people will find something else, as it always is, but it will not happen. I think that's my point. And even though it's a banned plastic, there are still a lot of other materials that people recycle. Now there are aluminium, styrofoam, different paperwork, cardboard, and then we come to the more valuable materials such as copper, for example. So there are massive amounts on different materials that people pick up or buy from households and recycle further.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathrin. I was wondering, do we have any questions online or anything, perhaps? We don't have. Okay, so then which one is working? Yeah. Yeah. So let's keep going. So I don't, do you have any kind of question about, I don't know, methodology, what she's trying to do, what Kat calls, you know, circular kind of, you know, kind of practices when we say circular? What do you think she has in mind? You have an idea? Yeah, cycle. So what we say cycle, what do you think? What can be a research we do a cycle? There's the line. Yeah.
And let's use it like oh, and it of you, so it's so that you won't get many more fish. Yeah. So like for example, the plastics you can get and recycle it. So there will be no more produced.
But in this case, think about research. The research. So what I mean to you? But actually, like virtual and we meaning. Anyone else?
What we are doing here. So maybe this one, okay. So if you think what we are doing here, so yesterday you had the idea of a project, you had your first idea, and morning do something completely different. And then we ask you what? To think again about your project, and then to integrate everything you have seen this morning. So that changes already your idea of the project. So you're not going from A to B like that, you are just going like that, and like that, and like that. And that's a cycle of thinking. That's a kind of cycle research. Something that you feel, I mean, right now, if you think about your ideas of the project yesterday afternoon and what we have seen this morning, does it change something? Do you think that you are going through that, thinking again about the first idea and thinking, oh, I want to add something, or I want to change something, or decide exactly what I wanted, I want to add something else? That can be like that. Yeah. If you had to do a drawing of the way you think, what would you draw?
I like it. Ban vì bạn cái này xa đây bọn là đây lại form nhìn nó từ bàn vô mình phải viết vô cái đó là phải vô ai thì được giờ bằng nó có tôi nghĩ biết nó ở cái cái việc quay cái thay vì là cái vậy mình cũng mình rất sợ này mà Các mình là hai tiếp như vậy đâu luôn là sao nó bị là lấy cho quên bỏ sản đài mà quên tiền thường một tiền tập mà mình nghiên cứu sâu mình ám cái tiết đấy nó cũng có này là quên chắc là mình lại mình chia vào trong mình coi cái chung nguyên đấy chứ họ lại sao cũng đã những cái lọc được khỏi về những miền bay bay kiểm tụ được hai cái tới cái chúng ta nên bỏ tay bỏ mà bắt đầu vào nó gọi là hai chỉ process này circular research mình tôi thì tại họ còn làm thế nàyตลอดมาเลยเขาอัดในโบกแทนตัวชุดนี้เป็นแบบนี้มีอะไรเลยเยอะอัดสมัย7ปั๊บเลยนะเลยนะอัดโดกันนะเป็นบอกเป็นดีไวอัดไม่เคยดูกับอัดโดเป็นตายมาเองเลย
Maybe Kathrin, you could give us a very concrete example of this kind of cycling research you do, and maybe if it produced every time you recycled your research, if it produced maybe some kind of different archive.
Yeah, I was just also thinking about recycling thoughts. Yeah, because I really like the idea of getting it together with a circular economy model. Of course, I mean, the problem to understand now also, or my problem to make understandable what I understand under the terminus of circular researching as a method is, of course, that my topic also deals with circulation, like in circular economy models, the circulations of the HIs. So there were lots of circularity termini now in my talk also. So yeah, but what I mean is really to recycle thoughts basically. So what I used, or what I tried to also visualize in the presentation was to understand the social materiality of the urban fabric as the first entrance point. So as Stephanie just exemplified it with the billboards, so there was really good point to see what could be envisioned, but what is past, what is it's just something that we have as an entrance point. It's the first thing that we see, and then based on that, maybe our curiosity arises, and then we try to make sense of the thing that we see. We want to know more. I mean, that's the researcher's interest in general. So that is how a research object becomes a research object, and all these signs, billboards, whatever, architecture, HIs circulating around the city, they are all representative of something, and we want to know what this something is. So we start investigating in, for example, by going back into history, as I did, for example, going through very traditional archives to make sense of how, for example, plastic came into the country. And then I had some ideas about that, and then, of course, I was thinking anew about my objects of inquiry, my research interest, that is the recycling economy in the city. So I had different ideas. It shaped my understanding, my thinking of it. The object became differently. It became more thick. I had more information, but the research doesn't stop there. It goes further. So and that's the back and forth between the research object and what you find out, basically, whether that's in history now, or maybe it's a billboard that envisions something of the future, or it might be, as I found out, something from a very different place, so that you see that hierarchical or certain power infrastructures are part of the project, or part of the object that you are seeking for to understand, that comes from very different sides. So, and every time you're reconsidering what you want to find out, you're reconsidering what research object is. So this is the circularity that you're coming back always. It's always referring to something else. It's not like that you as a researcher on its own are thinking, okay, now I made some analysis on the historical context. Now I go back to the research object. Of course, that's not how it works. It's like, it's of course a messy process in your brain, it's like, it becomes like that. And that's the reason why I call it circulation, because that means literally that something refers back to something. And that means that the researcher is not really taking it back on its own to the research object, but the things that the researcher find out are automatically interlinked with the research object. And that somehow is the point. But yeah, it's very difficult to explain in an abstract sense. But I think as you all did now, you've defined the research object, you have been in certain places this morning, as I have been told. So as Stephanie said, I think things change already. And the method basically is to not forget all the other scales that often play a decided role when we are trying to research. And that is not only the historical aspect, that is also the contemporary and the future aspect, but it's also, different geographical sites, and even sites that are not located in a geographical sense. For example, if they play out in certain discourses, for example, when it comes to circular economy model, that's a really international discourse right now, but it's very probably predominantly defined and originates from global north countries, for example. But also in the internet, so if you have different sites, that's just what I wanted to say. That there's a multiplicity of different sites, and even though you maybe think that this is only you want to understand the urban fabric of the city only from a historical angle, even then there are other things coming into play which direct you automatically to other sites that are not necessarily only in the past. I don't know if this explains it.
Yes, that's. Oh, it's working. Yeah, it's working. Yeah, yes. Thank you very much, Kathrin, because I think it's also a very important point that research object is not static. It changes all the time. Every time you discover something new, your object, changes with that. And yeah, you see, for instance, some of you have already been in Troll slang, but this morning you had, Anne who explained you something that maybe you didn't know. And I think that changes now also the way you see maybe Troll slang and the history of Troll slang. So if you go a third time, you look at something else and that will change the way you think about it. And it's still the same research object, but you start, look at it from all kinds of different angles. And then it doesn't look like the same thing. Yeah.
So hello, madam. And I wonder, what are your achievements so far after your research?
You mean in academia or non-academia? What do you mean with achievements?
Like everything you might think, more than academia.
More than academia, because now otherwise
I'm too over the high achievement you got.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes really the sound breaks up. So you wanted to know what kind of achievements outside of academia after my research I have reached, right? Okay, I think so. No. Yeah, that's a good question. So what I wanted to do is I always tried to combine somehow academia with non-academic work, and this is that's a lifelong task, I can tell you. So because I'm educated as a social scientist, so to fix it now broadly, and as a social scientist, I'm educated to think critically about systems and themes, but not to give certain advances or tips or to develop any strategies or something. That is basically not my how to say it. It's not my job. However, things are complicated in this world, and of course I can't say, okay, I'm an anthropologist, so I don't give any advices. Do your stuff on your own. I just do research on something. That doesn't work. That's also something that it relates to a certain ethos, of course. So what do I want to make a difference? What kind of difference do I want to make in the world? How do I see myself as a researcher? From which field do I come? For example, I'm white and male, white and female. So it's also something that differs, of course, situations when I'm in the field and I'm researching. So things become a little bit more complicated than just saying, okay, I'm doing research and I have some academic achievements. So what I tried was, to also work together with many different people. So I work together with artists. I also work together with actors from the recycling sector, also within international consultation projects already. I work together with many universities and their students. Okay, that's more academic again. But there were exhibitions, there were movies or short movies that came out. And there's just a book right now that is published, which is unfortunately in German, because I thought it would be good also to bring something back in a German-speaking context where I originally derived from, where basically it's my home country. So there are different things that I do basically, but it's always very important for me that the insights that I gain throughout my research, doesn't matter if this is in Cambodia or in Vietnam, and also, as I said, it's always very transnational topics. So I also do research in Europe, particularly in Germany, but also in Switzerland, for example, especially on these same topics that I'm researching in Vietnam and in Cambodia. And of course, these insights, I would like to distribute them further. So I try to do my very best to do so. But it's sometimes very hard, of course, because every field of practice, professional practice, has its own rules. So basically, you can say all the disciplines and all the professional fields outside, whether that is now the recycling economy sector or whatever, the international relations sector or whatever, they all have their own system of rules, of course. So it's sometimes very hard to bring together words and find common ground. But I try my very best if they let me.
គាត់ព្យាយាមរៀនទាំងការងារស្រាវជ្រាវបង្រៀនជាសាស្ត្រាចារ្យនឹងផងទាំងនៅខាងក្រៅលើសពីគាត់ព្យាយាមធ្វើនៅលើបទតែមួយនឹងតាក់ទងទៅនឹងវិស័យកែច្នៃវត្ថុដែលគេបោះចោលហ្នឹងឡើងវិញអញ្ចឹងក្រៅពីបរិញ្ញាបត្រក៏គាត់មានធ្វើការសហការសិល្បករធ្វើការជាមួយនៅវិស័យនឹងតតែម្ដងនោះជាមួយអង្គការសហព័ន្ធផ្សេងដែលធ្វើការដើម្បីដោះស្រាយបញ្ហារឿងសំណល់របស់ប្រាស់នឹងដូចគ្នាអញ្ចឹងវាអត់ស្រួលទេគាត់និយាយថាក្នុងជីវិតទាំងការឬក៏ក្រៅបរិញ្ញាហ្នឹងធ្វើទៅដោះស្រាយលើបញ្ហាហ្នឹងដែលចាប់អារម្មណ៍ប៉ុន្តែនៅក្នុងវិស័យមួយវាមានបញ្ហាវាមាន system វាមានរបៀបមានរបបរបស់វាអញ្ចឹងពេលខ្លះបើយើងត្រូវតែតទល់ទៅមិនរកផ្លូវអីឧទាហរណ៍គាត់ជាមនុស្សស្រីស្បែកតអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុងបទនយោបាយអីគេមួយ system អីគេមួយគាត់ត្រូវតែគេហៅថារកផ្លូវរបស់ទៅជាប៉ុណ្្នឹងយល់ណា
So I think, Kathrin, that you are very busy today and that you will need to leave us. Yes. If there is no other question, remark. Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Ms. So I've learned that you are right. So
I can't hear you, unfortunately. I don't know, maybe it's because of where people sit in the room. I just thought.
I'm interested. Can you hear me?
No, not really. Or maybe you can just post your question and someone else is summarizing.
Hello. Me now.
Better, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn, and I'm interested. Your country is in Germany, and what I learned in Germany, there's a policy where plastic bottles have embedded tax. So, it could incentivize people to turn the plastic bottle get to money. How is it working right now? It for context.
I couldn't hear it. I could. Maybe somebody can summarize it.
I'm Dr. Kathrin.
Not if you
Yes.
go on the other side of the room. I can hear you better, I think.
Is it here? Is it better here?
Yeah, here's good. Yeah.
Okay, so
He was wondering if your home country, Germany, there's a policy that has been implemented regarding recycling plastic bottles. And he was asking if the policy is working well with the German, and if what do you think would happen, or if it would work in Cambodian context?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So yeah, there is a certain policy that provides the possibility of recycled plastic material, and that also counts for many other materials. Definitely, it's working quite well, basically, but only on a national scale level. And that is one of my critique on the whole circular economy model as well, because this is a problem that cannot be solved only on a national level. Because, for example, in Germany, there are massive amounts of, for example, materials such as, I don't know, metal and copper and whatever, and not even the extracted materials of metal or copper, but cars, radios, whatever, electronic systems that are recycled in countries of the global south, for example, in Malaysia, but also particularly in African countries. So I couldn't say that it works pretty perfectly in Germany, because it doesn't, you know. That's the point I made at the very beginning of my presentation. Of course, we don't see it, and of course, on a certain level, it works very well with plastic, for example. But on another level, that all with other materials, it doesn't work at all. So, but yeah, okay. But if we just stick on the plastic example, for example, of course, we can try to implement that in a Cambodian context. And actually, there were a lot of endeavors to do so. So this is nothing new. But the problem is a little bit that I don't think that something will work in Cambodia just because it is implemented top down. So what you need that are different dynamics from different angles. So that could mean, for example, that in school people are taught how to recycle, for example. So because there's a certain knowledge you need to know, then you need also an infrastructure for that. That would be ideally somehow in correspondence developed with the existing recycling infrastructure, for example. So one of the main problems is also that households, for example, do not separate waste yet. Okay, that's because they don't know. But that means, for example, that also plastic, for example, is very dirty in Cambodia generally, because it's entangled in plastic bags with other things, you know, that leaks and whatever, it stinks and whatever. But the problem is that the more dirty the materials are, the harder it is to recycle them well. So these are certain things that. So you see, there are different points where we need to start, basically, and still, yeah, I think, yeah, there are multiple things that would be necessary to do to make such a system functioning, and it will never function as it is in Germany, because Germany is just a very different country with a very different story than Cambodia. And I think that is very important to understand, because here there is already a recycling infrastructure on site, and that developed since 30, 40 years accordingly to people's needs, for example. And doesn't mean that they're starving and they need money and therefore they recycle materials. Yeah, that's one point, but it's not the only point. It gives them some sense of you know, being part of the city, for example. They have an important job, basically. For example, HIs have an important job, and they think about it in this way often. So I think that it's not an easy question, or it's not I can't answer it clearly. Let's say it like that. So I don't think we shouldn't strive for a complete, you know, a one-to-one transformation of the model, how it works in Germany to Cambodia. I think that would be a really big mistake. But we can take ideas from that, and I think that's important.
Thank you so much for your answer. Any to add or have anything?
I think if there are if everything is clear, we will say. Yes. So I said that if question, we will thank you so much for your great support, for staying with us and for talking with us and answering our questions. I think it was fantastic. I mean, you gave us all kinds of ideas, and so we wish you a very good day. Thank you so much again, and of course we will be in touch. So everyone. I mean, let's say a big thank you to Kathrin and wish her a good day.
Yeah, thank you. I was really happy for the invitation, and I would have loved to be there in person, but I just came back from Vietnam, so now back in Switzerland because the semester starts next week. So I wish you all good luck for your research and for the whole workshop. And thanks a lot that I was able to talk to you today and that you were so good listeners. Thanks, and thanks, Stephanie, for inviting me again.
Thank you, Kathrin. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.